I agree, yeah. Welcome everybody to St. Paul's this evening. I think you're right, the food is very good and therefore it's hard to prize people away from the barbecue or the table. But welcome to all of you. It's really good to have you here.
Just going to leave.
My name is Pete. I'm the pastor or the vicar here. And I think we might get a few more people coming in. Welcome as well if you're watching on YouTube Live or if you're catching up afterwards. Lovely to have you join us by the miracle of technology. And I think the food has been particularly good actually. So I wonder if we could clap loud enough that they can hear us outside. To the team, to the cooks. That's particularly Katie and Marilyn and Verona, so I'm really grateful for their help tonight. Now, my friends, we're here for It Is Well With My Soul. I've been really looking forward to tonight, and our guest is Olivia Harrison. She's a friend of mine. She's a Sheffield girl. She's been in London for 16 years. She's worked as an executive assistant at the Times and the Sunday Times. She's married to James. They have 3 sons. She's a member of the church here, and she has a special story to tell of her own health crisis. So please would you give a very warm St. Paul's Harringay welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi there. Oh,
You all right?
that's softer than I was expecting.
This is softer. Yeah. How are you?
Thank you, I'm well, yes.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you for agreeing to this evening.
You're welcome.
Olivia and I
Don't think you gave me a lot of choice.
You could have turned it down. You could have done. Olivia, you're here to talk about a health crisis, and now it all begins 2019.
Yeah.
You told me you were a mum of 3,
Yeah.
and you felt like you were getting into your stride.
Yes.
So what happened?
That's exactly it. I had 3 young sons. I would have described myself as a busy mum of 3. I was decluttering my house with the aid of Marie Kondo. So that was taken about 7 weeks, 8 weeks prior to where I'm going to start from. And yes, Marie Kondo was a huge phase of decluttering, and I was going ahead with that. I was a member of here at St. Paul's. We were a relatively new graft still from Christchurch Mayfair. I was leading the women's Bible study here midweek. My husband James there, he was working 5 days a week in the office. Do you remember those days? And was often out late, working hard to support our lovely family there. Edward was 4, in the middle there at the back. He was in his 2nd term in primary school in reception. Daniel was 2 and was enjoying his 2.5 days that he did at nursery each week. And that's Tobias, or Toby, also known as. And he was with me all the time. So he was pretty adorable, except for when he wasn't. So I would have said, really, I was pretty content with the life that I was living. I was just go all the time. And I'd say the only thing that really troubled me was occasionally I'd get flares of anxiety. They would flare up and I'd find that a bit hard, but I had coping mechanisms in place and a wonderful supportive husband, and so, life was pretty good. And then came the 11th of February 2019. So, broadly speaking, an insignificant day. I'm sure none of you remember what happened on that day, and fair enough. I couldn't have told you what happened to me the week before. But I do remember that day with alarming clarity, actually. It's almost like I can't forget it, in a sense. And perhaps that's because that was the day that my life, in many respects, changed massively forever. I dropped the 2 older boys at school and nursery. I came to Bible study with Tobias, and then we came home, had a bit of lunch, and I put him down for his sort of long nap. And I had a phone call booked in. So I sat on the bed for the duration of his nap with my legs sort of out like this in front of me, and had the phone call. At 3 o'clock I jumped up, I got Tobias up from his nap, and I started on the school run to go and pick up my eldest son and his friend. And noticed that my legs were just feeling really tingly and weird. And I thought, oh, well, it's because I've sat like that for 2 hours and I've trapped a nerve, and what an idiot, and I carried on. And after picking up my son and his friend from school, I then went to nursery to pick up my 2-year-old Daniel. And in the 15 minutes from leaving the school to arriving at the nursery, my legs went from feeling fizzy and a bit funny to I was walking like I was drunk. I was sort of dragging my feet. I was leaning heavily on the buggy. I must have looked an absolute sight, in charge of 3 children and then 4. So I got to my friend's house, and the kids just rushed in and off they went to play, and that was great. And I just said, I've trapped a nerve. I can't move my legs properly. She said, oh, well, go and lie down on the sofa and put your feet up. And when I couldn't lift my legs onto the sofa, we were both like, oh, hold on. This might be a bit more serious than just a trapped nerve. So she found my phone, which was under the buggy, and I called the doctor's surgery, and they called me back within minutes. And I dragged myself the 300 meters from her house to the surgery, and she very kindly kept my children. And 45 minutes later, I dragged myself back to her house. James, by this point, was on his way coming from the office to get the children, because I'd been told to go straight to hospital. Now, the GP surgery had actually tried to call an ambulance. But me being me, I was like, well, let me go and hand over my children and pick up my Kindle and, I promise I'll go straight away after that. So that's what I did. And my GP wanted me to go to the Royal London in Whitechapel. And I was like, I live in Stoke Newington. There are 4 other hospitals really close and much more convenient than the Royal London. So in actual fact, though, I have much to thank her for, because she was really on the ball. Latterly, I was told by my neurologist that she had identified it as a neurological problem that I had. So she also wisely called ahead. So when I dragged myself from my Uber into A&E, I'm not kidding, I slid along the floor. People going, are you all right? And I was like, no, not really. She'd called ahead, and there was a 6-hour wait for A&E at that point. But I was triaged within 15 minutes by a neurology consultant. And that's when things really started to kind of pick up speed. They called out the out-of-hours MRI team to come in from home. They'd already gone home, and so they were coming in. That, for me, was the first real indication that anyone was genuinely concerned about what was going on. I was like, oh, okay. And despite being someone who struggled with anxiety, I would also say that for me was the first indication that it was the first thing to trigger a fear that it was going to mean more than an inconvenient evening sat in A&E. So that was that day.
So at this point you're thinking, this is not just an inconvenient evening, I might be here overnight or something. So was it just like a night, a week at most in hospital? What happened?
Yeah, I wish. So in actual fact, as I headed off to hospital that night, Edward has said to me, Mummy, when you come home later, will you kiss us goodnight? And it still slightly breaks my heart that I couldn't keep that promise, but I had no idea at that stage that I was not going to be able to keep that promise. And a bit of a spoiler alert, but I got home 10 weeks later. So it was a bit of an ordeal coming up.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, the first 2 weeks that I was in hospital were a blur. In my, it was tests and lumbar punctures and scans and ultrasounds and blood tests. I mean, I think I gave 65 vials of blood in about 6 days at one point. I think that's what we counted. But looking back over WhatsApps, because that was sort of how I could see what had been happening, I would say that I don't remember being afraid. And actually, if you look back over my messages to people, that seems to be true. That seems to be the case. I wasn't overwhelmed with fear. And I would have said I had a myriad of reasons why fear might be a kind of appropriate. And despite my anxieties. And I can only say that I know my memories of those initial weeks are fuzzy, but I do remember a peace and a calm about it, which I would say is what the Bible describes as the peace which passes all understanding, which guards our hearts and our minds. And that, for me, was obviously a very true thing. And I think it stayed with me throughout the rest of my time in hospital. And it continued, because over the 7 weeks I spent in the Royal London, they were ruling out everything from multiple sclerosis to strokes to spinal tumours.
Just trying to work out what has happened to her legs.
So they spent about 7 days trying to rule things out. All this time I was completely unable. I'd lost everything from the bra line down. And it was the sudden onset of it that had really confused the medics. And eventually I was diagnosed with what they call acute transverse myelitis. So it was inflammation in my spinal cord across the area of 3 vertebrae. So basically everything below that, the nerves just weren't getting through because of the inflammation. But yeah, so, I mean, shall I crack on? I mean, I was inundated with visitors, I have to say, and I'm an extrovert, so that they brought me so much joy. Distraction as well. That was a huge part of the joy of having visitors. I didn't really have to think about my reality too hard. My husband James was, amazing. He was working truncated hours so that he could take Edward to school in the morning, but he was also coming home early so that he could put the boys to bed, to be a sort of source of consistency, because I had been the consistent one and I had just been suddenly removed. And he was trying to get me to be with me for crucial meetings with my medical team. And at the same time, he was applying for partnership at his firm and living with his in-laws. So my parents had amazingly moved to London to help out with the children. But it was no mean feat. I don't know how James didn't combust. But no, they did it amazingly as a team. And yeah, I mean, if I named all the people who showed us love and compassion in those months, sending notes, cooking meals, helping with the children, visiting me, or just sending a WhatsApp. If I named them all, I'd use up the rest of my time tonight. I was very, very humbled. Over 70 people came to visit me in hospital in those weeks, and most of them came more than once. And that was really humbling, and they will never know what a comfort. I don't think they'll ever fully know what a comfort that was to me. The sister on the ward actually commented that she had never known anyone with the back-to-back visitors that I seem to have, sort of 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we used to whisper behind the curtain so that they wouldn't throw them out.
When they were outstaying their hours.
Exactly, yeah. Hospital hours ended at 8, but I used to sneak them in because we were well behaved. They didn't throw them out till about 10. Yeah, she suggested a diary system. So, but yeah, she also liked that it made me a very low maintenance patient though, because my visitors would always go and get me the drink that I needed or whatever. Yeah, and then they were amazing, like the church family supporting us so amazingly well with meals that were taken to my family. And that really helped my recovery as well, because knowing that they were being cared for just lifted an emotional burden for me, because you know, I didn't have to worry about them or the strain it was putting on my mum, trying to cook for 3 adults and 3 children and things. So, yeah, it allowed me to focus on getting well to get home. And in the initial weeks, my boys could only visit for an hour a week. It was all they could handle, and it was all I could handle as well. I was in so much pain, and they were, 1, 2, and 4. You can't, schlepping to Whitechapel. It was a big expedition for my parents and James to get them there, and then they'd start to melt down, and and I couldn't lift them and do what they wanted. So it was hard, and the absence of them was a gaping wound. And I think one of my survival techniques was trying to forget them, if I'm honest. Just trying to forget that they were sort of running parallel and I don't mean that in a heartless way. It was a self-preservation thing for me. And as the weeks wore on, I found that the nights were so lonely. I didn't sleep well. I think there's a picture at some point. I don't know, it might be coming up in a bit. We'll see them there. Oh, yeah. So I took that picture because I don't know why, I just felt the need to capture how I was feeling. Maybe, I don't really know why, but I haven't deleted it. So Pete was like, "You got any emotive pictures?" I said, "I have, Pete, I have."
I didn't say emotive, I just said pictures. You came up with this, I mean, goodness.
No, yeah.
But it speaks volumes, doesn't it, for how you were feeling.
That was about 2 a.m. That light that's shining on me was not the flash of my camera, that was the light above my bed.
Right.
It was, I learned to sleep with a pillow literally across my face, just to get any darkness. My sleep's not great, it's not great now, but I would sometimes just lie in bed and shake almost with like anger or fear, and like anger towards God, and like just, crying these silent tears. Why has this happened, and begging for healing. And would often send out late night WhatsApps. If anyone's up, please pray, I'm really struggling. There were highs and lows, and the highs, well, one specific high, I was hoisted in a crane. So that was literally very high, and I was on the 11th floor in the Royal London, and my visitors used to walk into the ward and go, "Oh, have you got an amazing view?" And I'm sat in a bed facing that way with the view there, and I'm like, "Apparently so, yeah, thanks." I can't move, I can't. "Oh, it's beautiful. Let me take a photo for you." "Oh, thanks so much," So one day they were going to hoist me into a chair so that I could sit in the window, and of course James was on hand to video the hoisting, and it was possibly one of the most uncomfortable and most undignified moments of my life.
It's undignified, isn't it, to be hoisted?
Nothing. Pete will tell you I'm famous for a TMI, giving too much information. But in this video, I'm just there, and I'm in absolute hysterics. And James was like, he said, "What is it?" And I said, "I keep farting." And he said, "Yeah, I know, I got it on video."
Thanks, husband.
Yeah. The lows were really low, though. They were unspeakably low, some of them. Just being vulnerable. I was so vulnerable, and and I'm quite a strong, I'd say strong, independent woman, and the vulnerability I felt was incredible. Especially, what I found surprising is that feeling vulnerable towards, and because of some really unkind nurses that I encountered, and that was really hard. And I started to get a bit of a voice and go, "I don't want you anymore, go away." But it made me think about people who can't advocate for themselves. And that was hard. And I hated feeling a burden. I hated feeling that people felt obliged to come and see me. But they did so willingly, and they brought me fresh fruit and salads and all the things that the hospital kitchens were not giving me. So And it's hospitals are wonderfully wonderful places because they're necessary. But being there is quite demoralising at times. But I found it sometimes miserable and sometimes hilarious. I mean, I could write a sitcom based on my 7 weeks there. And God's given me a glass half full kind of personality. I look for the funny in situations, and it's a personality trait that I thanked him for many, many times, actually. I had a drug-addicted roommate who terrified me the first few days. Like, she'd just give me these hard stares, and she was super aggressive, and I was bedridden. I couldn't move. There was nothing I could do. And I came to love her so much. She was so much fun, and she used to say, "Right, everyone shut up. Olivia's going to do bedtime prayers. Shut up, shut up." And it's, "Right, you can pray now." "Oh, okay." She was just.
And you would then pray for the whole
because we were in
ward?
No, it was a bay. There were 4 of us in a bay.
Right,
so
still.
it was a mixed ward I was in a female-only bay. And she'd be like, "Right, shut up. She's going to say our bedtime prayers."
Excellent.
She was just so funny. And she kept feeding our old neighbour Nancy lots of Haribo. So Nancy would sit there without her false teeth in going for ages. I mean, Nancy, bless her, I did go and visit her actually when we were both out. She's since passed away, but I visited her just after as COVID lifted. But she was 90, and she was good for comedy actually. She one morning I woke up about 6 o'clock in the morning, having only got to sleep probably about 3, to find Nancy sitting in my chair on my blanket, rummaging through my personal bag. And so I called the nurses to come and get her. And then they went, "Oh, and we'll get you a fresh blanket," because while she'd been sitting on my blanket, she'd weed on it. And then because I'm extra lucky, as they led her away, I got a nice view of her backside through her open hospital gown.
Oh, lovely.
Another time she walked out of our ward, and just outside, out of our bay, and just outside our particular bay was the TV room for the ward. And it was about 3 in the morning. And there were a load of old men in there watching TV. And she had her gown open then as well, so that got her a lot of wolf whistles. But I think my favourite Nancy story was one night about midnight, and the nurses she was in the bed literally opposite me, so I got the full show. The nurses put her on the commode one evening about midnight. And I was giggling away because they suddenly started shrieking because they hadn't put anything underneath her to catch it. So she just started going to the loo on the floor, and it was as they were shrieking. So lots of things that made me laugh. I mean, there was an old man in one of the other bays, and when I started walking, I used to go around the ward with a Zimmer frame, making these steps, and he used to watch me pass, and then he'd shout, young lady, please come and help me. My bum itches. Is my bum's itchy?" I was like, "Nurse." I mean, I could go on and on. Like the funny stories that I've got. It was a roller coaster though, because there were the times that it just felt really bleak, and I would say none more so than after the Royal London, I went for 3 weeks to the Wellington Hospital in St John's Wood, because we had I got some rehab through our insurance.
So this was supposed to be a nice private rehab place.
Yeah.
Step up from the NHS hospital.
Well, I had my own room. That was a step up, yeah.
Okay.
Although then I was a bit lonely. So
missing Nancy.
So no Nancy, yeah. Although I did sleep better in that hospital, I have to say. But I went there for 21 days. That was the fixed period I was given for rehab. And about a week in, I was then taken out by sepsis. So I'd got a urine infection and then a kidney infection, and then it had turned to sepsis because I couldn't tell that I had any of the symptoms. Now, I'd only managed to get a place in the Wellington Hospital on their rehab program because I'd agreed to take a bed on a different floor and go in the lift, the 2 floors that it took me to get to the rehab. So I was actually on the cardiac floor. But when I got I nearly died with the sepsis, and when what a mercy. I was actually on a ward with nurses who were trained in acute medicine, high dependency care, intensive care training, rather than like the rehab nurses who were wonderful, but they would be there to help you get your bladder and your bowel working well. Yeah. They had a different kind of specialism. So the fact that God in his goodness ordained it that I would be on a floor with these incredibly well-trained nurses is amazing. But my fear was greatest one night. For about 2 days, I'd had a fever of over 40 degrees, and I was lucid one night, and I heard my doctor outside my bedroom, and he spoke to my nurse, and he said, we're preparing a bed for her in ICU. In the meantime, just continue the high dependency care. I'm going to go and call the family now. We're just going to have to see how tonight goes, but this infection's really taken hold of her. And that was, sorry, I've told this story before. I didn't think I was going to cry. And I remember thinking to myself distinctly, have I just gone through all of this just to catch the UTI that's going to give me the kidney infection, that's going to give me the sepsis, that's going to kill me? Like, seriously, was that it? And actually, I listened to the voice notes that I recorded for my 3 boys. So after hearing that, I recorded some messages for them, and about 18 months later, my dad and I sat down and listened to them together, and it was quite harrowing to listen to them, actually, because you can genuinely tell that I truly believed I was going to die overnight. So obviously I didn't. Spoiler alert. So I can report back on what happened, but shortly after I finished recording those messages, my nurse returned to my bedroom, and her name was Gloria, and turns out she was a Christian lady, and she said, she saw that I was awake and I was crying, and she said, go back to sleep. And I said, no, I don't want to go to sleep. I'm scared to go to sleep, because what if I don't wake up? I'm not going to wake up. And she said, do you know how to pray? And I said, yeah, actually I do. And she said, okay, well, you pray and I'll pray. And she cupped my face. Oh, sorry. She just held me like that, and held me until I fell asleep. And a short while later, my parents arrived, and I never ended up in the ICU because my fever broke as my parents prayed over my bed as I slept. And I had no knowledge until months later that my parents had even been in. But so yeah, so that was probably the hardest part of the sort of acute, that week. And then trying desperately to make the most of having just had sepsis, desperately trying to make the most of my final 7 days that I had for rehab.
Because you had the 21 days.
Because I had 21 days,
right.
And then they were like, we're not paying for any more, and that was not money that we had to be able to afford to elongate my stay. Yeah. So, yeah.
We've got some more photos of that whole period. Can we see a few of them?
There you go.
What's going on there?
Well, this is one of the benefits of being in hospital.
Yeah, toe massage.
Your friends come and give you foot massages.
Foot massage.
and oh, there's Nancy. Sorry.
Oh, bless her.
There's Nancy. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so this is a friend.
This is
doing what's needed.
This is just they came and lifted my spirits, and and looked after me. And
okay, what have we got next?
Oh, that was when I was giving one of my various bloods. That's my dad, and it was so sore, and he was like, wrestle me. So I was like, oh, all this is going on in the other arm. Oh.
Yeah.
So that was quite early on. And I think I'd had my first, that was probably about a week in, or just under a week in, and I'd had my first wash, like body wash.
Okay.
They were few and far between.
Yeah. What we got next?
Oh, that was little Daniel.
That's number 2 son.
So he's number 2 son.
Yeah.
He's now 7.
On one of those rare visits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've got some more. We've got the other.
Yeah,
the other
I chose
boys.
one with each of my kids in. There you go.
So this is Edward.
Edward weathered it most.
Yeah.
Like
son.
the eldest,
Yeah.
he was 4.
Yeah. And then.
Oh, so that was a
youngest
FaceTime
son.
with my mum, and that was Toby. And when the FaceTime ended, he used to look behind the iPad to try and find me.
Yeah.
So that was me desperately trying to stay cheerful. Are there any more?
That's it for now. That's it for now. Yeah. Okay, so we need to fast forward a little bit, because obviously you walked in here tonight, as many of you would have noticed. So what happened?
Well, yes, I've walked in here. It's brilliant.
Should not pass us by how brilliant that is.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, round of applause for the legs.
Yeah, indeed.
I mean, that's probably best explained, well, basically about a month into the whole ordeal. It took about a week for them to work out what was wrong and what the treatment plan was going to be. And then about a month in, so about 3 weeks later, 2 doctors came along to my bedside, and they said, your recovery's been, and then the second doctor just leaned round her and went, the word that the doctor is choking on is miraculous. And she went, yeah. And they said, we don't like that word as medics.
Wow.
They said they'd seen as much recovery in me in 3 weeks as they would ordinarily expect to see in 3 or 4 months. I was always the last case to be discussed in their team meetings and the multidisciplinary team meetings, because I was so encouraging. And I just said, I can get on board with miraculous. That's okay. That sits with me. That sits fine with me. I know that I have hundreds of people around the world praying for me. And I knew that because I was getting messages from people going, you don't know me, but I know someone that you used to know, and we're praying for you. And sending lots of love from Sydney, Australia, and sending lots of love from Austin, Texas, and it was amazing. So as far as I can glean, in terms of information, my level of recovery is in the top 20%, possibly even in the top 15% of people who go through what I had. Plenty of people don't ever walk again, so that's amazing that I do. The threshold of recovery that I was aiming for was, I want to be able to look after my children again on my own without another adult needing to be present. That's what I wanted. I still have diminished sensation in much of my body below the bra line, but it's there. If you hit me, I'll feel it. Ooh.
Yeah.
So maybe don't. But
and your right side is your least good side. Is that right?
So I have neuropathy in the sort of lower leg from about here in my right leg and from about here in my left leg. I still stumble and trip, but mostly I can style it out. I drive a hand-controlled car because my right leg and my right foot are the most significantly impaired in the long term. Another miracle that the doctors weren't expecting is that I regained control of my bladder and bowel, which they had actually led me to. They were preparing me for self-catheterization, say that 10 times fast, and for regimens for the other bit. But by God's grace, I regained control of that. No, not like if I'm running for the loo, let me through, right? So give a girl a pass. I mean, so I am very pleased to say I did get control, but sometimes just I don't get a lot of warning is probably the kindest way to put it. So there's an element of being a bit nervous. You know, I'm 40 years old and I'm out and about thinking, do I need to do an emergency wee? There's a loo there. You know, it's not that fun being out and about and thinking, am I going to wee myself? So I have ways of making sure that doesn't happen. But
okay. We'll leave that one there.
I'm not too proud to admit that it has happened. And to be honest, nothing on earth is more embarrassing than sitting paralysed in your bed when the most gorgeous young doctor you've ever met comes and stands at your bedside for a nice chat, and he's telling me the encouraging things. And I said, the suppository that I had 20 minutes ago has just worked. So, so I thought he'd go. And no, he hung around for another 15 minutes, which was mildly traumatizing. And I'm like, do go. Do please go. Please send a nurse. Yeah, I mean, these days, standing for long periods is painful. Sitting for long periods is painful. I'm still in pain every day. But to greater and lesser degrees now. And I still see my absolutely incredible sports massage therapist every week or every fortnight, depending on my levels of pain and stiffness. I can't wear heels anymore. That's quite sad. But my vertically challenged friends tell me that I'm already 6 foot, so I should shut up. I think generally most people looking at me wouldn't think I was disabled. And I do find myself working quite hard on the tough days to hide my pain from other people sometimes, especially my children. And I think that's a good thing and a bad thing that I do that. Sometimes I think it's partly me clawing back, almost like a safety net of self-sufficiency, independence, being a bit proud, I don't like. So I will admit to being in pain, but I don't want to be known for being grumpy about my pain. Like I wouldn't want that. Having said that, I'm also quite a contrary person. My husband would probably agree. But sometimes I feel my feelings get hurt when I feel that people, especially my husband, or others, might have completely forgotten, what I went through, or that I'm still struggling. That there's a physical cost to everything that I do for me. But that's completely ridiculous if you think about it, because on the other hand, I'm working so hard to not be defined by it, and so that people don't know. So the fact that when people have forgotten, that's actually a win. Yeah. So I'm just a wally. But, it does that. Being honest about my emotions, that is how I can sometimes feel. So, yeah.
Got a few images of your recovery and rehab.
Oh.
Oh my
gosh, that photo.
Talk us through some of what's going on in this photo.
Well, there's my catheter back.
Oh, charming.
The next time I took that photo, I was like, I'm just going to turn it round. But that's a better photo.
Such a proud moment otherwise.
Such a proud moment. On my feet, there's my Zimmer frame. That was about 3 or 4 weeks in, and was me standing, literally, I think I was showing off. So I'd first stood maybe the day before. So I was showing off for someone with a camera. There I am. Okay. And that was the first time I went outside. So that was like 5.5 weeks. And they came to visit. You can see I'm quite slumped. I didn't have that sort of control.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a special moment.
Yeah.
And then I think we've got a video of you learning to walk again.
Oh, yeah.
So, here we go. having turned the catheter bag
So much better
around
than
this time.
Because my pee's facing this way.
No, I mean, you were really bearing down last time. So you're supporting yourself a heck of a lot more.
There's my view.
Through the window.
The first one I saw, Olivia, they were actually helping your legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're lifting that one up all over yourself. Don't wear out.
I got dizzy there.
Smile for the camera.
Okay. This is amazing.
It was
You're
you,
gonna turn around
unsure
before
if
you can go.
you were going to carry on.
To the door, but nobody needs the video to be that long.
Amazing. That brings it home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Seeing that, yeah.
And that was probably a week or so after I started walking again. I don't know if you could hear the conversation in the video, but Mike, who was filming, was just saying that the last video was them literally putting my legs, and they said that normally that's the sort of stage that they're at for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And a week later I'm like, I've got a Zimmer frame.
Yeah.
So it was amazing.
We've got another hard one here, I think.
Oh yeah.
That's another middle
Just
of the night
another
one.
middle of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should have plucked my eyebrows.
And then
There's me. That's me.
this is in here.
So
isn't
that's
it?
me. So I started to get released for good behaviour. Just on a Saturday and a Sunday, or sometimes just one if I was exhausted. But I had to go back to hospital. So it was after about 5 or 6 weeks. I had to go back to hospital by 10 o'clock, otherwise I'd lose my bed. So you have to be in hospital overnight to keep your space.
Yeah.
But to be honest, by then I found hospital quite reassuring, so I was quite glad to get back. It was quite an adjustment, like adjusting to there not being someone on the end of a button.
Yeah. I remember it was very emotional seeing you shuffle in here. Yeah.
Actually, the first time I came in a wheelchair, so that must have been week 2 or 3 that I came back. Yeah.
So, we've called tonight "It Is Well With My Soul," and you chose the title.
I did.
So presumably, we'll come to this in a moment, but presumably then that was all fine. It was always well with your soul. You were a picture of emotional health and vitality on the inside the whole time. Is that how it was?
No. There was crying, wailing might be a better word. There was doubt, anger, fury with God, like that he'd let this happen. Silent tears of regret. Silent tears of turning back to him and saying sorry for my saying sorry, and then being completely furious and cross with him the next day, of course. But just also understanding that God was big enough to take my anger, my fear, my confusion. Confusion and hurt about the situation I found myself in. Then there were pockets of hope somewhere, and some would come to fruition and others would be completely dashed. And then sadness, and then calm and peace that I was talking about earlier. And then after that would come hopelessness and resentment, and then more smiling. So I think I've hopefully accurately shown that I was all over the shop. That I was, emotionally all over the place at any given time. But I still felt peace, sort of overarchingly.
So where does that come from? I mean, you talked about the visitors that came, and they sound amazing, but what helped you through with that peace all along?
Well, it sounds a bit cheesy. I'm just going to cross my legs again, sorry. There we go. It sounds a bit cheesy, but faith, hope and love. So if you're familiar with 1 Corinthians, that's right out that playbook. But the love of people was one of the things that helped, especially James. my amazing parents, my wider family, loving and caring friends, church family, even acquaintances and total strangers were very loving, and built me up so much. And then there was just this hope and trust that despite all the changes and challenges that were ahead and that were coming up, that were happening and that were coming up in the future, I kind of just knew I'd be okay. I just knew it. And then my faith, which grew and grew and grew in those weeks and months. And I think it was because all that I had otherwise relied upon had been stripped away, and yet I knew distinctly that I was secure in God because of his promises to me in Jesus, and that no matter the physical and the emotional struggles and everything, spiritually I was safe and my soul was secure. And that was an unshakable knowledge. Like that was just constant. I mean, I had some helpful comments from people, and they were loving people, just with misguided words. Do you know, they weren't meaning to be unhelpful, but they'd say things like, "If anyone can handle it, you can. God never gives us anything more than we can handle. You're so strong." I'm like, this is wrong. You know, God gives us the grace to get through it. It's, you know, he showed me that I can't handle it. And therefore, I turned and I relied upon him more and more. I was reading the Bible every day, which is something I hadn't been doing with 3 tiny children so much. And often at night, and the word I chose when I was thinking of this is like, it saturated my heart with his goodness and his love and his promises, and my confidence in God grew. And in fact, so there it is, my favourite verse since 2019 is this one in Jeremiah 17:7. "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him." And I made countless of these. I did that like using an app. So, and I made loads of them for my encouragement. And then another encouragement came, reminders of the verse Romans 8:28. "For we know in all things God works for the good of those who love him." And it was really helpful to make sure I didn't take that out of context. He doesn't say to make all things good for those who love him. That's not what it says. It says for the good of those who love him. And the Bible says that what's for my good is to make me more like Jesus, and to refine and strengthen my faith. And God definitely used this experience to do that.
Yeah. And one of the other verses in the Bible that you and I have bonded over recently, actually, is when Jesus meets a disabled woman. And I think we can have it up on screen here, actually, because we now share a passion for helping people access things like church or everyday things when they've got limited capacity. So it's been nice talking to you about that. But we came across this together, didn't we? We were doing some Bible study prep for the church, and this is a moment in the Gospels recorded for us when Jesus meets a woman. She's just bent over, right? So she's basically got a spinal condition. And just thought I'd love to spend just 5 minutes just delving into this story with you all, because I think it's such a special, it reminds me of your situation, but obviously it's spoken to people down the ages. So it goes like this. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. I love that characters like this get recorded in the Bible. I mean, she never sat on a throne, never got an OBE. She never wrote a book, but here she is. She's recorded for us, and we're still talking about her 2,000 years later. And imagine being her. I mean, 18 years of being doubled over. I mean, they probably didn't have a medical name for it in those days. They just said, there's the woman who can't stand up. But she shuffled around for 18 years. She's in the synagogue, so she's managed to get herself there, but presumably she's she's never in the spotlight. She's never front and center. She's coped with lots and lots of dismissive comments and people's ire and then unhelpful things that they've had to say. But I'd love to just point out two things about this amazing story, which I found so encouraging. The first thing is that Jesus is tender. He's just so tender with her. So if we go to the next slide. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And he put his hands on her and immediately she straightened up and praised God. He's just so tender and gentle of Jesus. I mean, just when Jesus saw her, I mean, that feels like vintage Jesus to me. You know, he saw through all the people with the power and all the robes and the religiosity, and he saw the woman probably at the back of the synagogue, and he saw her and he noticed her. That alone gets my attention. Then he calls her forward and he says to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." He's just so tender with her. You know, I think in the West we've only really woken up to equal rights, particularly for disabled people, in the last 100 years, I guess. And yet, this was 2,000 years ago, and Jesus is doing it. He's seeing that woman in the synagogue, he's calling her forward, and he's dignifying her. I think it's amazing. He's so tender with her. And it's not just a one-off, because he's tender with people to the point of death. You know, Jesus, when he's executed on a cross, he's still caring for his mother, because he's worried she's going to be without help, and he's caring for his friends and the criminal next to him and the people that he's dying for on the cross. I think this is an amazing Jesus moment. So he's really tender with it. And then just the other thing I love about this story is his power. He's just so powerful. So he put his hands on her and immediately she straightened up and praised God. He's powerful. And I love how unembarrassed the Bible is about miracles, a bit like you were saying when they use the word miraculous. And the Bible is like that, right? Because we live in this miraculous universe. I mean, why on earth are we here in the universe? We live in these miraculous human bodies, which almost all the time do exactly what we want them to. And we have this miraculous God. So this happened that day. And the power comes straight from Jesus because he's the one. As we're getting ready for this week, Olivia, I had this image of an oasis in a desert. And it's quite a biblical image because often when the Holy Spirit gets poured out, it's like this dry, arid place, like a place of suffering and not much going on, not much life. But then God comes and there's this great verdant plants and there's life and there's greenery. And I felt there was an image as I knew what you were going to say tonight. I felt there is, even in a great dry phase, great dry desert, there's this great inner life. And that's a very, very Jesus thing to do, I feel. It's actually very hard to get the combination of the two things here, I think. It's very hard, isn't it, to get tenderness and power in the same person. But here you have it. I was trying to think of people in modern life. Our political leaders. Boris Johnson, I mean, power? Yeah, the guy had a degree of power, didn't he? He had a big majority. Tenderness? No. He didn't have that. You can go back, can't you, through prime ministers. Theresa May. Tenderness? Maybe a little bit more than Boris Johnson. Power? No, she didn't. She really struggled with. She couldn't get much through. So it's really hard to find. You go through people in power and tenderness, but Jesus has it in spades. He's that person in this woman's health crisis, and actually, I think he was that person in yours too. All of which I think begs one main question. What do you think that might be?
You're going to have to tell me.
Well, I think it begs the question, why doesn't God do that for everyone? If he's tender and powerful, why not everyone on the ward? Why not everyone in the world? Why not complete healing? Right?
Yeah.
And Christianity doesn't lay out all the answers to suffering neatly for us, right? It doesn't put it all on the table and there you go, everything is compartmentalized for you there, so you've got it all sorted. But it does give us Jesus. And Jesus talks to people with body and soul in mind. It struck me getting ready for tonight that he doesn't just go around to people and say, there you go, bodily health, all yours. Because if he did that, like we would all be walking around like superheroes. We'd have these invincible human bodies. But I don't know about you, I don't think the world would be sorted. I think there is more than just the bodily health, because there's this innerness to us, what the Bible calls the soul. And even if we were all superhumans with invincible, perfect health bodies, there would still be this propensity towards discontentment inside me, or depression inside me, or a certain rottenness and selfishness in the human race, which super bodies isn't going to do away with. You see what I mean? So Jesus comes to earth as God in human skin, and he says, I love your bodies, like here, but I want to help your soul as well. And he launches this great program for helping bodies and souls, which we'll be talking about a bit more on Sunday, actually, when we gather here for church. Olivia, we've got to wind up. But how do you look back on your health crisis now?
Yeah, sorry, I've probably gone on a bit long. God got my attention, I would say. And being truthful with myself, perhaps the only way that he could have done that in that stage of life was to take me out by the legs, quite literally. And it took my focus off the trivial and also the important things in my life to help me refocus on the most important, on him. I've noticed that as my recovery has increased, my reliance on God can often decrease again, which I think is a very human thing. But this story of mine, it does serve as a reminder for me that on the days when I try and plough on and do it all in my own sort of strength and whatever, and often ignoring God in my day-to-day, then he still has me safe and secure. And when I remember, I do try and pray in the mornings, just, Lord, teach me what it looks like to rely on you today, like in the day, like no big prayers about the future, just today. And a few months after my discharge, actually, someone said something that struck me, that each person who's been through suffering, I've got it written down, each person who has been through suffering has the opportunity of new things, and even, ministering to people, which had previously not been part of the journey that they were on. And when I think in those terms, first and foremost, I think instantly of my friend Claire. She and I met in the Wellington Hospital in their spinal rehab program, and we were both paralysed by something different, so different causes, but we have similar long-term ramifications from the cause of our paralysis. For now, we're quite similar anyway. Back in 2019, we were both 36. We both had very young children. And we live a 10-minute walk away from each other in Stoke Newington. And we've got mutual friends in common. I mean, who'd have thought? I mean, talk about a God-given friend, frankly, because there's nothing, there is nothing that that is stronger than the slightly tragic bond that we have in that sort of two people who just know what it's to be completely raw yourself, but also with each other in a really vulnerable way, and walking alongside each other in trauma and also in recovery from trauma. We met in wheelchairs, so what a joy it is now to take my dog out for a walk in Abney Park, Abney Cemetery, and just laugh together, laugh at each other as well, and sometimes just relive the traumas, because just to help each other heal, but also share the fears that we have for the future, like, whether they're physical, emotional, or whatever. I mean, personally, I describe myself as equal parts delighted and devastated with my recovery as it stands. I can still feel immense grief at times. I had a recent meeting with my consultant neurologist. I was really gutted that he didn't want to discharge me just yet. I found that really hard. And he told me that the level of recovery that I have is what I should expect for the rest of my life. I still struggle a lot with being able to sleep, and I can find myself crying at night sometimes, just longing for the pain to go away, especially after a really busy physical day. I just long for it to go away because being in pain all the time is boring and wearisome. I still struggle with anxiety at times, and I still think it's a bit unfair sometimes that I went through it. But I have learned to stop asking, why me? And I've been able to reframe it as like, well, why not me? Like, why not me? I think if you took me, you asked me about the day and earlier, and I was saying about what happened on the 11th of February 2019. I think if you took me back to that morning and gave me a choice, like, oh, if you hit that button, the big red button there, you could go through it all again. Would I hit the button? I mean, in all honesty, possibly not, if I'm being completely honest. But by God's grace, I can see blessings and I can see changes in me because of what I went through. And I pray that it will have had eternally significant impact on me and others. So at the same time, I can say, I sort of hold it in a balance, like, how can it not be worth it at the same time? And God in his kindness may show me more reasons why I went through what I did. Or God in his kindness maybe won't show me more reasons of why I went through what I did. But when he said, my grace is sufficient for you, he didn't just mean, in big events and things. He means in every situation. And there's a photo, actually, if you'll indulge me. I chose this photo to finish because it's from the day that I was discharged from the Wellington Hospital, and we drove back to my parents' house, one of the most uncomfortable journeys ever, to my parents' house up north, and everyone was waiting. There were balloons outside and hugs and tears and endless cups of tea, and it is a photo of such joy, but there is real hidden pain there for me. I had hoisted myself into a standing position, and I'd been absolutely determined that I was going to hold Tobias. So he was handed to me. You can see I'm holding myself up using the head of my 4-year-old. And the photo was taken, and then Tobias was swiftly taken away, and I had to go and lie down purely from the exertion of posing for a photo. So that was, the beginning of the next bit. And God is so good. I mean, look where I've come to now. Nobody's holding me up. Tobias is 5 now. I don't try not to pick him up too much, but I can do so many of the things that I want to do. I can look after my children on my own. I have a degree of independence again. I have so much to give thanks for, and what a long way I've come from that day. And whilst I was thinking about this evening, I still want my circumstances to change. I still want my pain to decrease. I still would love to have more recovery. And I don't believe that it's wrong for me to want that. It's not wrong for me to pray that. I can do that. And that is great. Pray for more. I pray for more physical healing. I'm on the weekly prayer list here at church. But there's an old hymn, and I think we're going to hear it in a minute. But the words are brilliant. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, even so, it is well with my soul. And that's why I chose that for the title tonight.
Well, I'm glad you did, and thank you for sharing. Yeah, we're gonna just listen to this old hymn. Thank you, Oppie and Benny, for being willing to play and sing for us. We used to sort of round off our evening together. This is not a church service, so I'm going to suggest we don't all join in. Some of you will know the words, but don't join in. We'll listen to it, and it's a way Olivia's chosen of reflecting on her experience. I hope the words mean a lot to many of you. And this itself was written by a man who had suffered, and he was trying to put into music some of what he was going through, as he said, "It is well with my soul." Thanks, guys.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, Thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control that Christ has regarded my helpless state and has shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. My sin, know the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is never Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul.
Thank you both very much indeed. That was beautiful, and a very good way to try and sum up lots of the story we've been hearing. And thank you all very much for coming. It's been lovely to spend this evening with you. I've been through all sorts of emotions, and I suspect you have too. As we finish, if you've been affected by anything tonight, I realise there are many health crises in the world, and there will be some close to your heart. Could I encourage you? It might be good to talk to someone about it, as lots of that stuff bubbles up inside yourself. You're welcome to talk to someone here. If you want to reach out, then we have this web address, stph.uk/welcome, if you just want to say, I could do with talking to someone about something. We haven't got all the answers, but we do love people, and we love to pray for people. And would you like to come to church? I mean, we're here every Sunday in this room, so you'd be most welcome if you don't normally come. We have this Back to Church Sunday this Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Holy Communion, and an 11 o'clock informal service with children's groups. So you'd be really, really welcome to come along to that if you would like to. We love Jesus, we love people, and we love Harringay. That's what we're trying to do. And to our guest, Olivia, thank you so much for sharing and bearing your soul. We're very grateful. Should we give her a warm round of applause? And I believe there are more drinks, chocolate brownies, watermelon, leftover food from earlier, so please go mad, go for it. Thank you all, good night.